So my talk today is entitled Shift Happens. You know, when you're about to step into a big pile of shift. When you find yourself all of a sudden up to your neck in shift, right? When everything just sort of, the shift hits the fan, so to speak. So we have been diving into Robert Brummett's really wonderful, wonderful book, Finding Yourself in Transition. And we are week 2, so I will make one of my pitches here. This is the last day to sign up for one of the study groups. So if you haven't signed up yet and you're like sitting on the fence, this is the time to step in. The sign-up sheets are over there on the table in the breezeway. And if you're watching online, you can sign up online. There are virtual classes. There are in-personal study groups. It's really an opportunity to be able to dive in with this community and explore these ideas of shift happening. Can anybody in here relate to shift happening? Whew, this has been a pretty intense year and a half. But we all know that shift is happening all the time, right? All the time, shift is happening. And what we're focusing on this week are chapters 2 and 3 in Finding Yourself in Transition. And one of the things that Tim mentioned at the very beginning of service, that one of the things that Robert Brummett is discussing in this idea of how we navigate transition is that our world has become very mechanized. Our world has become the way we structure and live into our world. He calls it a mechanized paradigm, meaning that that is even the filter through which we see the world. So it's not just that we've created a world that we are trying to impose order upon, but it's also the prism through which we experience everything that is happening within us. So a mechanized paradigm, what we mean by that is it means that it's a world that we're trying to make predictable. We're trying to make it expedient. We're very result-oriented. Can anybody identify to this? One of the most significant ways that we live in a mechanized world is that we can't even wake up without an alarm. We need a structure, an order to actually wake us up in the morning. Now, for those of you who are interested in discovering your natural flow of sleep, right, what they suggest you do is that you start with 7.5 hours. And you set your alarm. And if you don't wake up 5 minutes before your alarm, that idea just makes me want to, right? Anybody in here, the sleep hitters, hitting your sleep button over and over and over again? Okay, I'm one of those. So if you don't wake up 5 minutes before your alarm goes off, then you need to back it up another half hour and try 8 hours of sleep. And do you wake up 5 minutes before? The goal is that you wake up 5 minutes before your alarm goes off. Now, that very simple example shows how attached we are to this mechanized paradigm, to trying to make our life repeatable, to trying to make this, to impose an order upon something. Now, what Robert Brummett is suggesting is that there is a natural process that is change and transition, and that we, in our mechanized world, have lost touch with that heartbeat that is innate transformation, that is innate change. And that the invitation for us is to actually recognize it and honor it within ourselves in a new way. But the challenge to that is that the process of change, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, is not necessarily reliable in the way we want it to be reliable. Right? It's just, it doesn't operate on the, how many books are there? The 5 things to success. You can do this in 3 steps, right? We like everything to have a structure. So the invitation in chapter 2 is really about how can we trust this innate order that is actually present in change. It doesn't necessarily feel like it, but there is an innate order that is unfolding within any moment of change that you are experiencing. And guess what? Every moment is a moment of change. Just breathe into that for a second. So what that means, tying it into our unity principles, is that in every moment, there is order. In every moment, there is that which you can actually rely upon. Now, it's not going to look like your alarm clock going off every single morning when you want it to go off. But it is something that you can lean into. It is something that you can begin to trust. So what is this process that we are being invited to trust? So Robert Brummett breaks it down into 3 phases. He calls it really hard titles, right? Endings, the void, or what he also calls wandering in the wilderness, which I resonate with that so much. And then the last one is new beginnings. So let's take a look at these 3 phases. Now, what he also brings up in this particular chapter, I'm in chapter 3 now, is he's also talking about how there's parallels between this process of change, ending, the void, new beginnings, with the hero's journey. Now, for those of you who are Joseph Campbell fans, can I see okay, great, I love it. So if you know Joseph Campbell, you know that his hero's journey has many, 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 many steps to it. There are 3 larger buckets, though, that journey falls into. So the first part of that is separation. That is the leaving of something. So that correlates to endings in Robert Brummett's model. The next piece is initiation. That's where the hero has left the old life and now is stepping into this other experience where they have no idea what they're doing. None whatsoever. Anything that the hero tries to lean into from what they knew from their old life just becomes a disaster. In the initiation phase, what we're being invited into is to discover something new about ourselves. So all the old muscles, all the old habits, all those things that we learn to develop, our coping mechanisms, our strategies, none of them are going to work the same way when we are in this process of initiation or when we're in the process of the void. Those are the 2, they correlate. And then the last piece is the return, right? The hero returns. I think of Odysseus coming back, right? And finding all those other warriors camped out in his castle, and he had to sort of clear the way, right? To step back into his rightful place. But he was changed. He's no longer the same. When you come back into these new beginnings, the invitation is that you too have been transformed, that you have integrated something new about yourself that you discovered while you were in the void. So let's take a look at endings, the void, and new beginnings, right? And correlating that with the separation, the initiation, and the return. So I don't know about you, but how many people in here look forward to endings? Anybody in here really excited about endings? Yeah, sometimes we are, right? Right? Some endings we're actually like, please bring this to an end, right? I've had enough, right? On the whole, though, our culture in particular has an avoidance to endings. We want to avoid them because they're painful, right? Endings is where we're losing something, where something that was is no more. So they're painful, they hurt, they're potentially filled with grief, they're filled with sadness, they're a sensitive, owie place in our heart. But Khalil Gibran has this beautiful quote where he says, "Pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding." Pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. So what would happen if instead of being in avoidance about something ending, and those endings can be things that we are willingly stepping into perhaps, but most often they tend to be things that we're not willing to step into. So we think about death, we think about divorce, we think about losing a job, right? We can even think about moving that can be a place that's very, very painful, right? It may be something we're excited about doing, but it may be something that we're actually not excited about doing. So if it's an opportunity for us to crack open our understanding of ourself in the world, doesn't that all of a sudden perhaps make the pain have at least some sort of a positive gain to it? That it's not something that we need to avoid again and again and again, because if we're avoiding it, we're avoiding our own growth. We're avoiding our own expansion, because pain is how we crack open our understanding. It doesn't have to be the way we crack open our understanding. Let me be very clear about that. But it is a way that we crack open our understanding. Because our pain happens, suffering is optional. We've all heard that quote, right? That pain is pain and suffering is optional. And yet our pain and our suffering are usually directly linked to our resistance to the end. The more we resist, the more our suffering will persist. So if we want to minimize our pain and suffering, what we want to do then is also let go of the resistance. So I call it let go or get dragged. I know that the reading today was let go and let God, but I'm like, let go or get dragged. Because shift happens. It is happening. So you can either embrace the process or you are going to get dragged along by that process. And in that dragging, it's painful. So there are ways that we can navigate what is a natural process of ending and new beginnings in a way that can facilitate us not having to be dragged. So the ending of something has happened, and now we're potentially stepping into what is probably the most challenging part of the entire process, and that is the void. That is the wandering in the wilderness. That is the place where there are no familiar landmarks anymore. You are completely in new territory. You do not know how to navigate this. You have never necessarily experienced this before. And all of the things that you might have brought to bear, remember, this is the initiation phase, all the things that you might have brought to bear don't work. Can anybody relate to this phase of wandering in the desert? Now, I want to remind everybody that even as we're wandering in the deserts, like the Israelites did, wandered for 40 years in the desert, they had everything they needed: manna, water. They had what they needed as they discovered who it is as a people that they truly were. This is the opportunity for you to stand in who you are, like the root of the root, your divinity of who you are, not the idea, not the small understanding that you had been living into up until that moment. Because remember, our life's journey is the revelation of our Christ self. That is our life's journey. We are revealing more and never less of the truth of who we are, our divine nature. So every moment in this time of transition, every moment that you are in the void, wandering around, feeling blindfolded, feeling as if the sands are literally shifting beneath your feet, this is truly an opportunity for you to listen more deeply. It is an opportunity for you to be still and to allow the divinity that you are to make itself known. It is an opportunity for you to rediscover your values, reprioritize what is truly important. Who have you come here to be? Really come here to be. Because the beauty of that landscape that has us absolutely not knowing up from down or side from side is that anything is possible. So can we enter into the void, a place that makes us so uncomfortable because we have nothing familiar there to guide us? Can we actually enter into the void with the spirit of discovery, with the spirit of deep listening? Because that will ultimately bring us to new beginnings. that will ultimately bring us to that space, that place where we get to return the hero's journey. We are stronger, we are clearer, we are more vital, we are more alive, we are more aware, we are revealing more of our Christ self. Now, we love beginnings, right? How many people in here love new beginnings? They're pretty, they're shiny, their energy, their enthusiasm. We cannot skip the other two parts of the process and just get to the new beginnings. I've tried it. I'm sure you've tried it too. And what happens is you find yourself right back there all over again. That new beginning doesn't stick. That new beginning isn't integrated. That new beginning isn't grounded in your having discovered something about yourself and about the world. That is when we get to come back and we get to integrate in a new way. That actually is what I believe is true healing. It is when we are willing to walk through those hard spaces, anchored in. So Robert Brummett talks about trusting the process, and how I translate that for myself, and I offer it to all of you, is that it is activation of our faith. It is the activation of our faith in the good that is always seeking to express. It is standing in the awareness that nothing is against me. Everything is for me, even when it feels like a shift storm. Right? Everything is for me. And part of what you're being invited into when you're in that process of the void is you're being invited to recognize that everything you thought you knew, everything you thought you believed was actually a crock of shift. Right? And if we are willing to embrace the process, and I promise that's my last shift pun. I'll stop with the dad jokes. If we're willing to embrace this process, if we are really willing to sit with where we're uncomfortable, if we're really willing to be patient and quiet and listen, the divinity that we are, it rises forth in our understanding, and we are illuminated, and the old beliefs fall away. The things that were all about lack and limitation, the things that actually brought us to this moment, dissolve into the nothingness from which they stand. I call it making your ceiling your floor. The things that you're banging your head against, there is the absolute, if you walk this process, instead of banging your head against something, you will stand upon it knowing that it is not an obstacle to your greatest and highest good. That it is not anything that stands in the way of you owning your divine nature. That is the process that we are being invited into. To stand, now you can call it, I love the hero's journey image, right? The idea that you're ripping open your chest. You think about Superman, right? Supergirl, right? She does it too. They rip open their chest. There's something and reveal the superhero that they are. There is something that we're being invited into in this process that is about opening our hearts, that is being truly present to what might seem to be just unimaginable. There is some pain that feels unimaginable. But if we can actually stand in our faith, if we can actually stand in the truth of who we are, if we actually stand with each other, because that is the power of Sangha, then anything is possible. The possibilities, the new beginnings, begin to open up for all of us. Now, one last thing that I want to say about this process, just so you're aware, because there's a part of you that's going to want to put you're going to want to figure it out, right? That mechanistic paradigm is going to want to be like, oh, that's the 1, 2, 3. Oh, I get it. Oh, I got a handle on this. I want to say that you are in change in every area of your life right now. Just breathe into that. Some of it may feel more alive and more alert right now, but you are in change in every area of your life right now. And you're not in all the same points on the compass. In some places, you're in new beginnings. In some places, you're in the void. In some places, you are in an ending. And it's not going to be consistent. There are endings that can happen for years. Just breathe into that with me. There is endings that can happen for years. And there's voids that can happen for years. And then there's also new beginnings that feel like they go on and on and on and on and on. And then there are those times when things move much faster. Think about a graduation, right? In the process of a graduation, we have it all. We have an ending, junior high school to high school, leaving junior high, saying goodbye to your teachers, saying goodbye to your friends. So there's sadness there, perhaps. There's this void of like, oh, I was a senior in junior high school. Now I'm going to be a freshman in high school. What is that going to mean? I was top of the heap. Now I'm going to be at the bottom of the pecking order. I don't understand. What is that going to be? That's the void. And then there is the new beginning where you actually step into it, right? You actually engage with it. And in that process, you become something more. The song that we just sang, I am more. That is the invitation. But can you be patient with wherever you are, in whichever areas of your life are happening? When my dad passed away, we had been in ending for about 10 years because he was very chronically ill. So we had been in an ending for almost a decade where every phone call was waiting for that call, waiting for the call that was going to say, he's passed, right? We finally get the call, which in some ways, and I will own this, my first emotion was relief, right? Was relief because the ending was done. We had finally come to the end. And then there was the void. Who am I? As a daughter whose father is no longer on this plane, who am I? How do I show up in the world? What does that mean for me? And I have been practicing this, right, for a while. So when my father finally made his transition and I felt the void rising up, I just let it rise up. I didn't resist it. I didn't get dragged into the void. I welcomed it. And I literally sat on my sofa. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't do a thing. I didn't go to work. I did nothing for 3 weeks. My wife, God bless her, took great care of me during that time. I had friends. I had community calling. I would hear the phone calls, and I would just say, I can't talk to anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just need to be in this unknowing of what this is. And I did that for about 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden, something shifted, and I came out of it. My wife said she was going to give me 1 more week, and then she was going to call in some additional help, which I can understand. Right? But because I didn't resist the process, now don't get me wrong, you saw my tears. The passing of my father still like hits my heart in an incredibly sore place. But because I was willing to walk through the process, because I didn't resist the grief, I didn't resist the sadness, I didn't resist the not knowing what that was going to look like or how that was going to be, there was very clear delineations for me of where the process began and where it ended and where I was moving from one thing to the next thing. Now, it's not always that clear. I've been in transition where it's happened for years and, the void seems to go on forever. Right when I found this teaching, I literally thought that I had no purpose in life whatsoever. Like really. Like not like pretend and, somebody's going to tell me that I do have a purpose and it'll make me feel better. But really believed that I had no purpose in life at all. And it took me 2 years to discover and rediscover my purpose, to rediscover the truth of who I am. But I was patient in that time. I sat with the uncomfortableness. And I also had an incredible community around me. So the invitation is to lean into the book study groups, lean into each other, lean into our principles, lean into your innate superhero, lean into your capacity to be able to stand and see and know the truth to the best of your ability. And when you can't do it, know that there's somebody nearby who is willing to do it for you, willing to reflect back to you the very truth of who you are. So let's do these affirmations together. I am willing to let shift happen. I am willing to trust the process of change. And I am willing to embrace my superhero. And I want everybody to go like this as you do it. I am willing to embrace my superhero. Doesn't that feel good? And so it is.